Hello, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, back to start the new year off with a review of the Topping 30 Pro stack. Alright, specifically in this video, the top half of this stack with the A30 Pro headphone amplifier. So, as I just said, I am Wave Theory, and Happy New Year! It's a new year here, and so if you like what I'm doing here, please like and subscribe to my channel and help me keep this thing rolling. Alright. Also, a shout out and a thanks to Appos Audio for reaching out to me and restarting a relationship that we once had and sending me the 30 Pro stack. So the links that I will put below for these two pieces of gear, the A30 Pro amp and the D30 Pro DAC, will be affiliate links, but Appos has made no attempt to influence my opinion on these pieces one way or the other, so everything that you are about to hear are my own thoughts on it. All right. So, this video will be about the A30 Pro amp, and I will come back later this week and do a video about the D30 Pro DAC. Okay, so what is this thing? So this is a $349 US single-ended amplifier that is a measurement chaser and absolutely succeeds at topping, the measurement game. Okay, so it is a measurement champ. You're not going to find a better measuring amp right now in early 2022 at this price point in terms of things like Cyanad and THD plus noise, and there's a bunch of other measurements in there. Okay, so this one is designed to measure near perfect on an audio precision measurement rig, and it succeeds at doing that. So if that is your jam, you can just stop the video right here because it does that. It's vanishingly low distortion and all of that. Okay. The output power here is also nice and sparkly and significant, at least on paper. It is rated to deliver 5.5 watts per channel maximum output at 32 ohms and 840 milliwatts per channel at 300 ohms, both of which suggest that it has high power output. Now, I mentioned that it is a single-ended amp, and it is. Like, all of the internals are single-ended, but it does include a 4-pin balanced XLR headphone output and a 4.4 millimeter Pentacon balanced output, in addition to the 6.35/1/4-inch headphone, single-ended headphone output here on the front panel. All three of these inputs sound identical to my ears. I mean, it's a single-ended amp that includes these balance connections for convenience. Okay, let's take a quick look at the back panel where we see a master power switch, okay, an input power socket there. It has balanced TRS and single-ended RCA. I don't think they are pre-outputs. I think they might just be pass-throughs, but it does have those outputs there on the back. And then it has single-ended RCA and balanced 3-pin XLR input connections on the back as well. And again, the balanced connections are just there for convenience. It's still a single-ended amp, but it does have this fancy little ground and lift switch right here. So if you have a ground loop issue in your system, that switch could help you eliminate that noise possibly. So that's a nice little feature that was included. Coming back to the front end, looking at the build here, these switches right here, we see a power switch that also doubles as an input selector switch. All the way down is off, in the middle is the XLR input, and then up top is the RCA balanced, unbalanced input. Then we have a gain switch with 3 gain stages, a negative 14 dB stage, a 0 in the middle, and then a positive 14 decibel gain stage there for the high gain. So, in that negative gain stage, you can comfortably plug IEMs into this and feel pretty confident that you're not going to get any noise or hiss or anything like that, and have a fair amount of play in the volume knob and the potentiometer with those. And then, of course, the high gain is for driving really hard to drive loads, okay, like an HE6 if you wanted to do that, or high impedance dynamic headphones. Now, another interesting thing about the output here is that the Appos website specifies, and this has sonic consequences I have found, that at 250 ohms, anything that is a 250 ohm or higher load on this will switch into Class A operation. Okay, and so that's a neat little feature to include in here, and so we'll talk about the results of that in just a moment. But then, like, just overall, the build is pretty nice. It's not especially heavy. A lot of the weight comes from the machined aluminum chassis here, which is handsome, looks nice. Okay, it's a small unit, fits easily in the palm of my hand. These feet on the bottom are pretty sticky. Like, it does not slide on a desk very much, which is a nice handy feature there. And then just the positioning of the switches, the easy to use switches, the accessibility of the headphone outputs and all of that. It's a pretty easy to use unit, with just one minor exception. The volume knob here does not stick out very far, and so I have fairly small-ish hands, but if you have large fingers, this volume knob might be a little bit harder for you to operate. All right, but otherwise, I think it's a well laid out, pretty ergonomically friendly unit. So kudos to Topping for thinking through how actual people will use this, and making a device that is fairly well usable and easily usable there. All right. So that was the build and all of that. Let's talk about the sound. Now, for context, I have reviewed a couple of Topping amps previously. One of them was the L30 and the other one was the A50S, and I did written reviews of those on Hi-Fi Guides forum, and I'll link to those down below as well. I didn't like those amps very much. Like, I realized that they were excellent measuring units, much like this one, but they just, to me, did not sound very good. They had that extremely dark, basically sonic void sonic background, black void sonic background like you would expect from these high negative feedback op amp designs. Okay, they had that, but to me they were just over smooth to the point where they were like the sound, just everything kind of sounded blended together and there was not great separation, and they had very poor like macro dynamic punch, impact, slam, like that sort of thing, where it just sounded a little bit too dulled to an unrealistic degree to me. The good news here, this does not suffer from those problems to the level that the L30 and the A30 or A50S did, excuse me. So I think the A30 Pro is a step forward for Topping from a subjective sonic standpoint. It still has that basically sonic void, black void sonic background where music just kind of pops into and out of existence, it seems, which can be a little weird and unrealistic at times, but at other times has its advantages. Okay, so if you like that, it has that. Now, it is a little bit more smooth, say, in terms of lacking punch and dynamics than some of its competitors, but it is a big step forward from like the L30, A50 S models of previous. So it still has some of that smoothness, but it doesn't sound as blunted or as blended together as those other amps did. So good job, Topping. That's a step forward here on that. Okay, now what's interesting, and I mentioned that line of 250 ohm loads, it switches into Class A operation. There is a clear delineation in performance to my ear between different headphone types. Like, you step into high Z dynamics and this thing takes on new life. So for intent critical listening and reviewing work, I use 6 different sets of headphones that span different headphone types, and this is how I picked up on things changing here with that high Z load. I used 2 low impedance dynamic driver headphones in the Focal Radiance and the Fostex TH900 with Lawton Chambers on it. I used 2 planar headphones in the Audeze LCD2 Pre-Phaser and the Hi-Fi-Man Aria Stealth Magnet Edition. Review coming, okay? Be on the lookout for that. And then for high Z loads, high impedance loads, I use the Mastrop Sennheiser HD6XX, which is 300 ohms, and the Beyerdynamic DT880, which is 600 ohms. So we have fair range of headphone types in there. For the low Z dynamics and the planars, I was just not really a fan of this. So while it was a step forward to my ear over the L30 and the A50S in terms of not sounding overly blended and smooth and all that, it still suffered from that a little bit. It still overall just was a little bit flat and dull. The staging was kind of flat and wall of soundy. There was not particularly great imaging or separation. and everything just kind of felt closed in. Seemed to lack a little bit of micro detail too. Move up to the high Z dynamics though, the HD6XX and the DT880, and it woke up significantly to the point where there were times where I really genuinely enjoyed listening to music through this on some of those, particularly the HD6XX over the DT880. I thought that this matched really well to that headphone, but even with the DT880, like the performance was getting into the range where I was like, oh, okay, that actually does sound good. Okay, so there is a delineation there between those headphone types to my ear of like this changing its operation at 250 ohms or higher has positive sonic consequences to my ear. Okay, but I don't want to get too far ahead of things here because topping still has a shit problem. Okay, what do I mean by that? So this is $350, right? $350 US dollars. I still have around the shit Magnus, which is $199, $200 US dollars. Okay, and it is an actually fully balanced amp, and I have a review of this up as well that I will link to. And when I reviewed this one, I said that to my ear, this is the best sounding amp of its type. And what I mean by its type is one of those measurement chasing, high feedback, op-amp based amplifiers, okay, of which topping is still very much a part of that game. And for the most part, that statement is still true. Okay, this to me, particularly with the low Z dynamics and with planars, sounds cleaner, clearer, more detailed, more natural timbre, and more macrodynamic impact than the A30 Pro does. Okay, for again for low Z dynamics and for planars. For high Z dynamics, I think for the 6XX, the 300 ohm version, I actually preferred the A30 Pro to this one, to the Magnus for that headphone. With the DT880, again 600 ohms, I think these were pretty much on even footing in their overall quality, okay, compared to each other. Now, that is a little bit disconcerting to me because, again, this is $200 US dollars, this is $350 US dollars. And so, to me, the price to performance ratio of this is still lagging behind this. Okay, there. Now, even though this one can at least equal, if not outclass, the Magnus with high impedance dynamics, the shit problem still remains in that the Asgard 3 is still out there, and that's $250 now. Okay, and to me, that amp is still ahead of this one with high Z dynamics. Like the 6XX still has a little bit more bass presence, a little bit more clarity, and it just sounds a little bit richer and fuller on the Asgard 3 than it does on the A30 Pro. Very close. They are very, very close, but I would still give the edge, particularly in things like micro detail retrieval. Like, even though I volume matched everything, I kept wanting to turn this one up because it just seemed like it was just missing a little bit compared to the Asgard 3, which is usually a telltale sign that micro detail is a little bit lacking. Okay. Then with the DT880, like the Asgard 3 was noticeably superior again to this one, okay, into that 600 ohm load. So that to me, like, the result here is a mixed bag. This was a step forward from other topping amps that I have heard. Okay, so kudos to topping for taking a step forward. It is still behind the curve to my ear in the price to performance metric because, as I just said, the Magnus is sitting there at $200 and performs noticeably better than the A30 for low impedance dynamic driver headphones and for the planars that I tried. And then the Asgard 3 is out there at $250, which is slightly superior to this one when into the 300 ohm load that I tried, and then noticeably superior to this one in the 600 ohm load that I tried, even though those high Z dynamics are the strength of this one as an amplifier. Okay, so I can still recommend the A30 Pro in a certain situation, though. And that is if you live in a country where shit products are hard to get a handle, or hard to get a hold of, okay? And you have high Z headphones. And you might, because Sen and Bayer and then like AKG has a model or two that are high impedance, and so does Audio-Technica. And those companies do a good job with their international distribution, and you can get them pretty much anywhere in the world. Topping also does a good job with their international distribution. You can get them pretty much anywhere in the world. So if you live in a place where it's hard to get a hold of a shit product, and you have high Z headphones, and I think this actually becomes a really solid value in that situation, and that's where I would look at this one, and that's where I can kind of sort of recommend this amp. There. But here in the United States, where you can buy shit relatively easily, yes, I know there is a wait right now, okay, I would go that direction, okay? All right. Now, I did try, just because I was curious, okay, before I go here, does this drive the Hi-Fi-Man HE6 SE V2? Yes, kinda. Okay, like the Apos website talked up the power output here. It at least, like, you will get sound, you will get usable sound with the HE6. It does not breathe the life into this headphone that even like the Lake People G111 does. And I realize the G111 is $200 more than this, and all of that. But this one talks up its power output and says basically everything is easy to drive. Yes, it can handle the HE6, but it does sound just a little bit flat and dull and lacks a little bit of bass presence to me in comparison to, say, the Lake People G111, or like my KN-HA1A Mark II tube amp or something like that, which would be other under $1,000 headphones that I think can drive the HE6. So I'll just drop that thought there as well. All right, so that is my review on the Topping A30 Pro headphone amp. Thanks again, Apos, for sending this out. And thanks to all of you for watching. And until next time, enjoy the music.